Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. No, your eyes do not deceive you. I am sitting at the other end of the kitchen table today. Why's that, you might ask? Well, there have been a few comments about the fact that the sound quality wasn't particularly great, and that's because I'm obviously using the internal microphone on the camera I'm using to record this. Some people have said, well, it's just a bit too quiet and we can't hear you when the music, is too loud and I've got to turn it all down. And so I thought I'd just try something slightly different, try and get the camera a bit closer. In the meantime, I'll obviously look for a microphone to go along with this so we can go back to the way we were doing it. So, as Lemmy once said when asked from a member of the audience to turn up the volume on his mic, saying, can't hear the vocals, you should be so lucky. Anyway, that side. So this afternoon, what are we going to look at? Well, kind of killing two birds with one stone, I suppose, with this particular tasting, as we're looking at St Georges Distillery that is based in Thetford in Norfolk, which is where I originally come from, and we're also going to be looking at new make as well. What do I mean by new make? Well, new make spirit is basically the spirit as it pretty much comes off the still, and I think anybody that's interested in whiskey should at least try new make spirit at least once, because it kind of gives you an idea of the sort of, I don't know, the DNA of a spirit, I suppose. It's kind of like, this is what the spirit tastes like, before any other flavourings, wood flavourings and what have you have been added to the flavour of the particular spirit. And I guess up until recently, the only chance you would have got of actually coming into contact with new make spirit was if you actually visited a distillery and had the good fortune to taste it straight off the spirit safe, like I had the opportunity to a number of years ago when I spent a week working up at Rejteke, and amazingly informative of tasting the spirit at various points in the distillation process. I mean, obviously the majority of you won't have the option or the opportunity to do that. So thankfully now there's a number of distilleries that do bottle their new make spirit. Glenglassaugh is one in particular, but like I said, this afternoon we'll be looking at this particular lineup from St Georges Distillery. So without further ado, I'll introduce the lineup then, shall I? Right, okay, St Georges Distillery started distilling about 2006, tail end of 2006, and like a lot of distilleries, once they first start up, they need to generate some income, and they had quite a unique way of doing it. They decided that they would release some new make spirit and call it Chapter 1, which is what this one is. And effectively that's it, it's just new make spirit, unpeated. This particular sample that I've got here is was distilled in December, the 22nd of December 2007, bottled the 28th of January 2008, so nowhere near a cask at all. And I thought it'd be interesting to taste it up against the Chapter 6, which is the 3-year-old unpeated spirit. This particular bottling came from casks 0449 and 0452. It was distilled in February of 2009 and bottled in May of last year, and is the current available bottling in this particular size. And this chap here, this is Chapter 2. This is of course obviously the peated spirit that they do. This was distilled on the 29th of the 7th, 2008, and bottled on the 15th of the 9th, peated to 50 parts per million, again bottled at 46%. And I thought we would look at the corresponding peated chapter, or Chapter 9. This particular one was distilled in December 2007 and bottled in April 2011. cask numbers 659 to 664. Again, the current available bottling in 20cl. So it should be interesting. We'll see if there's a correlation. Hopefully, there's going to be a correlation between the two sets of spirits, and we'll see how sort of 3 years as or should we say how much wood character in 3 years has been imparted by that maturation. So start with chapter 1 then, Right, chapter 1 then. Incidentally, at the same time when they released chapters 1 and 2, they released chapters 3 and 4, and chapters 3 and 4 were basically the same spirit, but it had 18 months aging in casks. So it was, at the time, it was quite interesting to sort of see the progression. So anyway, enough of that. Let's nose the new make then, shall we? It's new make spirit. It's quite crisp, quite clean. A little bit of sort of floral mar character. There's a little bit of the higher esters, little bit of oiliness, a little bit of not quite diesel oil, but that kind of sort of alcohol oil, should we say. It's got a nice floral character, it has to be said. A little bit of cereal as well, as you would expect. But you know, it shows it's quite a delicate, quite an elegant spirit. There's a kind of a latent fruitiness, sort of a little bit of maybe banana, a little bit of apricot maybe, which you think, that could develop into something. That would be quite nice. So yeah, not too pungent a nose. Obviously, sort of bottling at 46% kind of helps that. I mean, if this was bottled at, as it pretty much would come off the still, then it would be a lot more pungent. So anyway, out. Quite sweet, cereally, a little bit gristly, a little bit of that slightly high-toned floral mar kind of character. Not a great deal else, it has to be said, obviously, considering 70-odd% of the flavour of a whisky is made up from what it's been aged in. But it shows some nice bedrock. It's got a nice kind of like I said, latent fruitiness, very elegant, a little bit crisp. So, although it's not something I'd probably want to drink all of the time, I mean, but then new make spirit is quite difficult to drink at the best of times. I think that's really pleasant, yeah, shows definite promise. Right, okay, on to chapter 6. So, let's see, what does 3 years aging in first fill American oak, it has to be said, give to the spirit then? Well, the floral sort of aspect of the spirit is still noticeable. I mean, there's definitely some obvious oak now, slightly caramel, a bit creamy, a bit toffeed. But certainly the spirit has kind of stood up to it really nicely. It's got a really nice elegance, like I said, it's sort of a little bit of a floral character. Quite juicy, some nice juicy barley. Sort of a fresh, lightly citrus note. I mean, I think for something that's 3 years old, this is actually remarkably complex. There's a lot going on. And it just has a lovely roundness, a lovely sweetness. It's not got any hard edges. It's soft, as you would expect from that part of the country with its soft water. That's nice. It's a nice nose. It's if you like your lowland whiskies, if you like things like Ladnock, then you know this is certainly something you ought to look at. I mean, yeah, okay, it's still a bit youthful. I mean, you're not going to get away from that. I mean, it's 3 years old, but it's not raw at all. It's quite harmonious. I think that's quite an appealing nose in actual fact. I like them. It's very much like the nose in actual fact. There's some lovely creamy toffeed oak, which is kind of up front, and then you get the spirit character, you get this sort of floral, sort of citrus character. It's a little bit short, that's no denying, but it's got a very fresh finish, lightly herbal, lightly perfumed, not a great deal of bittering oak. Like I said, the oak is very much up front, you know, you get it on the beginning of the palate, and like I said, it has a nice creamy toffeed kind of character, but the finish is all about the spirit, and obviously as the spirit will evolve, you'll get sort of more character, you'll get more of the oak, and you know, it will be, you know, less immature, should we say, once it's oxidized a little bit. So, but I think again, you know, for what it is, I think that's really enjoyable. It's really soft, unassuming, and again, you know, very much in a sort of a lowland, maybe sort of Irishy kind of style. So yeah, hats off. That's pretty good, I think. Right, okay, on to chapter 2 then, the peated spirit. Remember when I first tasted this all back in whenever it was released, I just can't remember, 2008, thinking, you know, this was really interesting, really good. Not too peated, so let's have another look at it, shall we? Yeah, it's a little bit more of a rawer nose. I mean, I guess that's the peat. But it's got a really nice sweetness to it. A sort of a sweet barley, which it's kind of taming, I guess, the smokiness. Kind of the peat is very dry. It's very dusty, very smoky. Almost, I guess, a sort of, I don't know, comparison, an Ardbeg kind of comparison wouldn't be too short of, well, you know, it's got that kind of smoky, slightly burnt wood kind of peat note. Again, like I said, it's got a really fresh nose. I mean, it shows that this could obviously develop into something really interesting. I mean, and although peated to 50 parts per million, which, you know, is relatively high, it's quite gentle, quite elegant again. Yes, there's that sort of slightly oily cereal character that you get with new made, but again, I think, you know, this is quite enjoyable. About then. Again, sweet barley, a little bit of citrus, nicely balanced, dry, woody, slightly spicy peat. Again, tails off pretty quickly, leaves a nice kind of oily, sort of very lightly tarred kind of peat aftertaste. Again, like I said, it's bolstered, it's got a really sweet, cereally kind of character. Yeah, I mean, that's nice. It's lingering. I mean, the finish might be a bit on the short side, but certainly that sort of smokiness is definitely lingering. So yeah, quite interesting. Not too bad at all. Not too shabby, as they say. Right, okay, and finally let's look at chapter 9 then, shall we? The 3-year-old peated then. Again, like I said, well, I say like the chapter 6, aged in first fill American oak, and again, very noticeable. Lots of toffee, creamy, vanilla-y oak. And behind it is that that sort of quite gentle, slightly more medicinal peat, less of the sort of earthy kind of peat, but it's got a lovely perfume to it. Again, sort of white flowers, maybe a little bit of lily, quite pungent in actual fact. It's got a nice kind of crystallised sugar coating to the barley. Again, lightly phenolic, a little, maybe a little bit briny, maybe I'm imagining it, I don't know, but yeah, probably. It's certainly got some sort of lightly medicinal peat, which is getting a little bit dustier. And sort of in the background there's maybe some light sort of banana-y, apricot, tropical fruit going on. Yeah, I mean, it's nice. It certainly shows that sort of, you know, that when you have your new make spirit, certainly your peated new make spirit, the peat is very much there. It's definitely a kind of a focal point. But once you sort of stick it in oak, certainly, you know, if you use first fill American oak, it certainly sort of gives it a lot of impact. I mean, the thing with aging whiskey in oak is that sort of initially and certainly if it's a first fill American oak cask, it's going to take up a lot of the oak flavour, a lot of the oak character very, very quickly, very early on. And then as time progresses, you get more of the oxidisation character from, you know, from the reaction of the spirit with the air. And certainly that's where you get an added kind of level of complexity. So at this current moment in time, 3 years old, it's very much all about the oak and a little bit of the sort of the spirit character of the peat. But you know, I kind of like it. It's nice. I think it's a really interesting nose. Well, now, interesting enough, the palate on this is completely the opposite way around to the nose. And sometimes, you know, I've tasted whiskies and you really get that. It's quite a surprise. Not so much of the oak noticeable now. It's a lot more about the sort of intense, slightly sweet, slightly gristly barley, dry, herbal, slightly earthy peat, which is really lingering, really nice. It's got a little bit of medicinal character, not as much as what I expected from the nose, and the oak is all very much sat in the back. You know, it's kind of this palate is all about the spirit. It's all about the sweet barley and a little bit of peat. And it's really nice, actually. I mean, I really like that. It's at the moment it's well balanced. It's youthful. It's got sort of an exuberance to it. You know. Yeah, that's kind of nice. I think sort of hats off. Really interesting. Right. Okay. So let's sum this up then. English whiskey. Wow, it's really good. I like it. I think it's really interesting. You know, not just the preserve of the Scots. Pretty much, you know, every country on the face of the planet these days makes a whiskey. And the issue I have with a number of those is they're just far too young. They don't really taste of anything. I mean, for example, I mean, I was tasting bourbons or American whiskey for this year's World Whisky Awards, which, you know, was really, really interesting. But so many of these American whiskies are just bottled when they're sort of like, well, they don't have an age statement, but you can imagine that they're no more than sort of 3 or 4 years old, and they're just raw and intense, and it's just sort of like, oh, this is just not enjoyable. And then in round 3, as I know what I've tasted in round 3, there was a number of European whiskies. I think one was a German whiskey, I think, off the top of my head. And yet, and again, you know, it was kind of bottled far too young. It just sort of reeked of oily cereal. It had no character. It was just sort of like, why in God's name do I want to drink this? I don't. You know, it's just, it's not good. Give it sort of maybe 6 or 7 years in a cask, and it will kind of round itself off. But you know, the pressures are on the distilleries to sort of, you know, get set up, get some cash flow in. For some, it's basically, well, we'll distill a vodka or a gin or something like that, which is great. Do that, brilliant. But just sit on your whiskey. If your whiskey is not ready to be bottled, if it's not ready to be enjoyed, all you're doing is basically, well, you're not creating a false impression, but you know, you're putting people off, to say the least. The English Whisky Company, I think, are doing just the right thing. Their spirit is you know, soft, it's supple, it's ready to drink at a relatively early age. Yeah, okay, you can argue it's not got the complexity, but you know, it's only 3 years old. But you know, I think for what it is, it's really enjoyable. It's got character. Even the new make spirit is just sort of like, you know, got some character to it. It's not just a case of raw cereal and maybe a bit of sort of, you know, soggy cardboard. You know, and it's enjoyable to drink, and that is the main thing. It's basically, forget, I mean, I know you can't forget the sort of the financial implications of you know, running a distillery, and the fact that you need to get some revenue stream in, but just bottle it when it's ready to be bottled. Bottle it when it's going to be interesting to a consumer and somebody that wants to actually taste it and review it. Rather than just sort of get it out there and say, well, I need to make some money. You know, find other ways of doing it. Like I said, you're going to go down the sort of the bottling early route, do your white spirits, do your en primeur cask sales, all that kind of stuff, you know. But you know, just, and it's one of the biggest gripes I have is that, you know, of bottling far too early, amongst a number of other gripes that I do tend to have. But anyway, coming back to the point at hand. I like English whiskey. I think this is really, really interesting. Like I said, I've been a big fan of this ever since the distillery started releasing their spirit, and I think it's like the Penderyn distillery in Wales. I think that the spirit is just going to keep getting better and better and more interesting. And yeah, okay, so initial sales were very much based upon the fact that it was a bit of a novelty. It was the first English distillery in 100 odd years. You know, it was a bit like, you know, it was a bit like when Penderyn first started up. But I think, you know, sales are still quite steady. I think there are, you know, people are coming back to buy it because they like it, not just because it's kind of, you know, it's an English whiskey. So hats off to them, and hopefully this summer I'll be paying them a visit, and we've got to get that obviously arranged, and hopefully I'll be doing some filming at the distillery, and maybe they'll let me taste some stuff straight out of the cask. Who knows? So anyway, keep watching for that. And well, just before we go, like I said, I mean, both these bottlings in the 20cl format are available on our website, www.gauntleys.com. There also is a really nice presentation wooden box set with both chapters 3, 6, chapter 6, 9 and 11, and 11 being the slightly heavily peated spirit that are available. Also available are obviously the fuller bottles, the full-size bottles, 70cls, they're also available on our website. You should be able to find obviously my tasting notes, certainly on the new make spirit. Not these two bottlings, because these are relatively new, because I haven't had the time to post them up and write tasting notes up, but obviously the other bottlings I've tasted from the St Georges Distillery are up there on my WordPress blog, so check them out. The newsletter, like I said in the last episode of the show, has now been finalised. It's been written. Hallelujah, takes long enough. So that's now out and about, and if you are not on the mailing list and would like a copy in a PDF format, you know, just drop me a line. I said either sort of drop me a line on YouTube or through the Gauntleys website, www.gauntleys.com, as usual. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to the distillery for the 2 samples of the new make spirit that they sent way back when, and all that's left to say is basically, what time is it? About 4 o'clock. Time for a peated Dram. Good afternoon.